Cabin Sports Radio.
Here comes the siren. I want to go higher. Oh, my goodness. Houston on drive. Deep left field. No doubt about it. Posey will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life. Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Oh, baby, for sure.
Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Another episode of Cabin Sports Radio on the Cabin Radio airwaves. Lecter and Unbreakable Mike Gibbons with you. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Not too bad. Your last show.
I know.
For a little while.
A 2-week hiatus. That's it.
Not forever.
No, I'll be
okay. Lots coming up today. Historic win over the weekend for Bianca Andreescu. Canadian tennis is in good hands for the future. We'll talk some NHL as the countdown to the playoffs, about 10 games remaining, and also maybe some college hoops.
That's right.
As Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Cabin Sports Radio.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. A little bit later on in the show, second segment for that matter, we'll hear from Spider Jones from Sport North and Chris Wright, who is the master trainer of Appetite to Play. They're doing some physical literacy and Appetite to Play workshops in the next couple weeks around the North, and so we will hear more about that in the next segment. For now, we're talking some NHL. Largely 10 games left until the end of the regular season, till the NHL playoffs take over. It is starting to become clear what the playoff picture is going to look like, but not too clear. What we've got right now in the Eastern Conference, there is going to be basically the following. The top 3 seeds in pretty much every division look more or less like they're going to be a lock if you do kind of a projection as to how teams have been over the last 10 or so games as we enter the 20 games before the playoff stretch. To right now, if they continue how they have been doing over these last 10 games, the top 3 teams in each division pretty much stay put. But the wild card spots are anyone's guess, and you never know when obviously things become a little tight with 10 games left. Some teams have injury problems. Some teams are giving up 5 goals every game. There is a lot that could happen yet.
You just stung a lot of Maple Leaf fans.
Oh.
That was an ugly 4-game stretch, wasn't it?
My God.
Not the kind of time you'd like to see those struggles. Yeah, we know that the top of the Eastern Conference is going to look like. I don't know if you're one to buy into the President's Trophy curse at all, but I think that race was pretty much solidified by about maybe the halfway mark of this season. We realized that Tampa Bay was going to run away with it.
Tampa Bay is not even worth talking about anymore.
They're still 20 points up, 19 points, 114 points on the season on the Boston Bruins for second place in the Atlantic Division. So I think that division's wrapped up. Only one of 2 teams to clinch a playoff berth already. Should note that the second one came this weekend. Calgary, the Calgary Flames.
Calgary Flames, yes, absolutely. Locking up a playoff spot. Still, again, don't know exactly where they are going to finish.
They're in a tight race.
Yeah, they're sitting at 95 points. The Sharks, I think, are 1 point back in 94. The Golden Knights sitting at about 85 points or so. So they're not really nipping at the heels, but as far as San Jose and Calgary goes, to get that full playoff home ice advantage, they're kind of fighting for that. The Jets are sitting at first in the Central Division with the Nashville Predators nipping at their heels, but neither of those teams looking like they're going to threaten San Jose or Calgary for that Western Conference, sweeping home ice advantage.
Right.
But great, really good to see the Calgary Flames have a season like this. I mean, they've been pretty consistent for the entire season, but I remember coming into this season when we were doing our season preview, there wasn't a whole lot of noise about the Calgary Flames. No. I think it was just there was a bit of like an eggshell feeling. Like if things didn't go well this year, not necessarily finishing in first in their division, or you're running away with the league or anything like that. But if the Calgary Flames didn't at least make the playoffs this year, you kind of got the sense that there was going to be a bit of a blow-up happening.
Yeah, we didn't give them enough love, evidently, at the start of the season.
No.
And really, from what I can recall, the marquee sort of signings in the offseason, of course, James Neal, who hasn't really panned out.
Hasn't had a huge impact.
No. And then Bill Peters behind the bench, who you would think, based on the season they've turned around here, has actually fared quite well.
Yeah.
Johnny Gaudreau playing at another level right now. Goaltending is still sort of that question mark, although Riddick has sort of taken off with the crease a little bit. Mike Smith, still seeing some inconsistency there. Their defensive corps looking pretty strong.
Yeah.
And we figured they would with Giordano at the helm there. But they're getting pretty good production from their forward units across the board. Not quite where we expected them to be at this point. So it's a nice surprise if you're a Flames fan. Like we said, only the second team now in the National Hockey League to clinch a playoff spot.
A pleasant surprise, unlike their northern neighbors in Alberta.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the Edmonton Oilers for the last 2 weeks have been saying things like every game is a playoff game now. And I mean, that's the way they had to approach it. They were on the outside looking in. They are still on the outside looking in. And I mean, they've had a good last 10, but they're still sitting one game below 500. And what do we got here? 8 points, 9 points out of a playoff spot, that final wild card spot, which is held by Arizona right now. Another thing that I don't think anyone really predicted at the start of the year. Obviously, things can still change. Minnesota is 1 point back of them. Arizona does have one game in hand, however. And Colorado, talk about a team that fell off a cliff from the midway point of the season.
It looks like it might come down between the Stars, Coyotes, and Wild, probably for those final two playoff spots in the West, those two wild card spots. But yeah, like you said, a nice surprise. And Arizona, kind of crazy looking at the Western Conference standings right now that we know the Kings aren't going to be there. We know the Ducks aren't going to be there, and probably not the Oilers or Canucks. No one has officially been eliminated yet. It's actually been a pretty fun race to watch to this point.
Right.
And it could heat up, in the final 8, 9, 10 games or so. But there have been no official eliminations yet. We figure the Kings sitting with 58 points, 20 points back of a playoff spot. I mean, I guess it's really only one would be their magic number to be officially eliminated. You can't make up any more than 20 points over that stretch. But we're talking about the Oilers. They're still not officially out of the dance.
Yes.
But it's another lost season if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan.
Absolutely. Of course, we were talking off the top of the segment, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have just had a god-awful stretch this past week, losing to the Chicago Blackhawks, going down 5-0, almost coming back to tie it, but still giving up 5 goals against the Chicago Blackhawks, who are, also kind of making a case for themselves down the stretch here. They are sitting at 73 points, 1 point back of Colorado, 4 points back of Minnesota, and 5 points back of that final playoff spot. Again, it's tough because they have to leapfrog 2 teams that are ahead of them to possibly get into that final wild card spot. But they've been playing pretty good hockey, 6-4 in their last 10 as well. Patrick Kane has had another fantastic season. Jonathan Taves has had a great season. You've seen guys emerge like Alex DeBrincat, who has had a wonderful season. And another young guy who's, I can't remember his name now. Now he's put together a fantastic stretch over the last month or so. But the Chicago Blackhawks, a team that, given how they finished last year, I don't think the expectations were necessarily high. But they're a team we've just become accustomed to see, if not in that playoff picture, then fighting for everything that it's worth. So it's surprising now, given the start that they had to this season. We thought, okay, this team is just done. They just need to blow it up and leave it all behind. And now they've actually put together a pretty strong second half of the season. And what do you do now? If you're Chicago.
Not without controversy either. You'll recall earlier this year the firing of Joel Quenneville, who was at the helm behind the bench for all 3 of their 2010, 2013, 2015 Stanley Cup runs. Always had deep playoff runs. And imagine a team like that, 2 games at hand on the Wild, so they could potentially leapfrog them or at least run into a tie with them, 1 point back of the Coyotes, that would put them 71 games played versus Minnesota's 73. Imagine a team like that, though, squeaking into one of those final wildcard spots. I don't think anyone would want to play them in a first-round matchup, even if you secure a division title. So looking at the Calgarys, looking at the Winnipegs, depending on how things shake down, maybe San Jose or Nashville squeak in there, that's not exactly a first-round opponent you would want. You certainly wouldn't take them lightly, given their playoff pedigree and experience.
And the interesting thing, too, being that a lot of these top-tier teams sitting in these top 3 spots, you look down their last 10, they're not playing great.
No.
Now, Vegas has been very good in their last 10, 8-2. That's kind of launched them into that third spot and kind of given them a bit of separation from that wild card scene. San Jose has been pretty good, 7-3 in their last 10. But you look at Calgary, 5-5. St. Louis, after that hot run they had just after the All-Star break,
right,
4-4-2. Nashville, 5-5. Winnipeg, 5-5. And then you head into the Eastern Conference, and I mean, again, Tampa, we don't even need to mention their name, because if there was ever a team that could have put it into cruise control a month and a half ago, this was the team. But no, still 8-2 in their last 10 because they're just that good. Boston has been very good, but have cooled off a little bit in the last couple. They won their last game, but they're 7-3 in the last 10. Toronto has been, as we mentioned, god-awful, 5-4-1 in their last 10. So they're staying alive, but not playing very good hockey. Washington and Pittsburgh, this is actually a division that has been really interesting and will be very interesting down the stretch, because there's really no indication as to where these teams are going to finish. It could be Pittsburgh in first place in the Metropolitan Division. It could be Washington still, or the Islanders could hold strong. They're currently tied with Washington at 91 points. Pittsburgh just 3 points back at 88. And then you look at the teams that are surging elsewhere. Carolina is 7-2-1 in their last 10. Columbus has kind of got it a bit together after the trade deadline. They were looking like they might have made a huge mistake going all in.
Could you imagine they don't make the dance after pulling off those moves? Holy.
They've kind of turned it around a bit. And then the Montreal Canadiens, who are currently sitting just outside the wild card picture with 81 points, 3 points back of Columbus. They could not have picked a worse time to hit a slump.
Yeah. Pretty strong showing for the Metropolitan, as you were alluding to, currently occupying the 2 wild card spots after New York, Washington, Pittsburgh, with Carolina, Columbus, and then even Philly.
There's a chance.
6 points back. Not looking too. That's not enough time to. They could be pretty tough.
They got a lot
to cover that ground.
A lot of tough ground to make up, for sure.
But then outside of that, I mean, the Atlantic Division, which we knew would be very top heavy at the start of the season, but currently occupying the basement for the most part in the Eastern Conference, and have none of the wild card spots as things were to shake down right now. So you'd have a potential first round matchup. I mean, Tampa's going to secure the top spot. So Tampa Columbus could be pretty fun. The bunch of jerks playing in Carolina. You figure they'll probably squeak in there. And yeah, looking like right now at the time the Habs have decided to struggle. Not a great time. 3 points back now, and quite frankly, running out of time.
Big game coming up tomorrow, Philadelphia versus Montreal. A 4-point game.
Yeah.
If Philadelphia happens to win that game, they jump to 80 points and are 1 point back of Montreal, depending on what happens. Columbus against Calgary. Obviously, Philly and Montreal both cheering for the Calgary Flames in that one. But that could make things very interesting depending on the result of that game. Speaking of the bunch of jerks, did you see their latest celebration?
Curling. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, over the weekend.
Got a lot of Prairie Boys on that team, apparently. All right, I think that should wrap up our last 10-game stretch here for the run to the playoffs as we go. I don't know. I was thinking about doing a Cabin Radio playoff pool.
Totally.
No.
Team-based, player-based?
Definitely player-based.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we could do a bracket. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah,
we could do a bracket thing. All right. We'll look into that.
Yeah.
We got 10 games left. That's plenty of time.
The Cabin Sports Radio Podcast, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Welcome back to Cabin Sports Radio. Two guests in the studio right now. One in person, that's Mr. Spider Jones, and one on the phone who is Chris Wright out of Victoria. He is the master trainer for the Appetite to Play program, which will be conducting several workshops through the territory. I guess, next week? Next 2 weeks, Spider?
You bet.
Okay. So tell us a bit about Appetite to Play, Chris. So glad you could join us on the phone, by the way. Happy to have you on.
Yeah, no problem.
And, so you're going to be in town all around the territory. A bit of a whirlwind trip, actually, conducting some workshops for Appetite to Play. Give us a little idea about what that is.
Yeah, so Appetite to Play started as a BC initiative to link healthy eating and physical activity in the early years. So it's focused around providing early learning practitioners, just kind of giving them some more ideas and kind of building on their capacity to link the two pieces, which we know are kind of crucial in the window of opportunity of the early years to build those healthy habits and hopefully keep them going on for the lifelong participation in physical activity and healthy eating.
Okay, and Spider, you are an absolute champion of this sort of thing. You've been conducting workshops of this kind for several years now. Is this your first foray with Appetite to Play?
Actually, no, we're very fortunate to have Chris into Yellowknife this past June, where he expertly facilitated the Appetite to Play workshop for some early child care providers and some parents of youth 6-year-olds here in Yellowknife when he was in town to do some training for summer camp leaders under physical literacy.
Okay. So you're very obviously happy to have him back. Are you going to be on the entire circuit here? By the way, Fort Smith, Wednesday, March 27th, Hay River, Thursday, March 28th, Yellowknife, also March 28th. That is going to be a busy day. In Nuvik, Friday, March 29th, and Tuktoyaktuk, Saturday, March 30th. That is going to be exhausting. Are you looking forward to it, Spider?
Oh, am I ever. No, it's a great opportunity to have this program in the NWT. We got special dispensation from the license holders in BC, the Ministry of Health. In fact, we're close to having a license granted to us so that we can have trainers trained in the NWT to affect the same program, but we're certainly pleased and privileged to have Chris coming up next week.
Okay, and what do you see as the end goal for this program?
Well, certainly the more awareness and support we can provide to early child care providers and parents for those who are under 6 to help kids get off to a healthy start by way of activity and supporting them with healthy fueling and nutrition. Okay.
Chris, how long have you been involved in with Appetite to Play? Master Trainer obviously sounds like a very important title.
Yes. So Appetite to Play has been going for a couple of years. So I was involved a little bit in the development of the program, from specifically the physical literacy side of it, which is kind of related to physical activity. Going around the province. So I went around BC up to Prince George and over to Vancouver and whatnot to train regional trainers like Spider was just talking about that we'll be doing up in the Northwest Territories as well.
Okay, so part of this this campaign is going to be to train people as well?
Yeah, we're hoping so. So as Spider just mentioned, we're just kind of in the final pieces of a licensing agreement to hopefully be able to train people up in the Northwest Territories to deliver this workshop themselves.
Okay. And if people want more information about Appetite to Play, where can they find that?
Yeah, so there's a fantastic resource online. It's appetitetoplay.com. Pretty simple. There's some e-learning modules that are free until March 31st. So if you can't make any of the workshops in person, you can get on there and learn lots of great information about physical literacy and food literacy. And the website also has a whole bunch of recipes and physical activity games that you can do with the kids from 0 to 2 and 3 to 5. And it's a fantastic resource that we upload new content to all the time. And there's some Easter stuff on there, so very seasonal. And it's a great resource. And that's kind of the goal is to, again, build that capacity and give parents and early learning practitioners the opportunity to enhance what they already do with the kind of this collaboration of everything that's been going on before.
Okay, and so obviously you run a lot of workshops like this, Chris. Where do you see is perhaps the biggest disconnect between like what physical literacy, physical activity, everyone knows is all good, but not everyone knows about the nutrition side. They think if you get some form of exercise, that's probably good enough and you can eat whatever you want. What do you think is the biggest challenge for this program?
Yeah, well, so this program, it's not about giving nutrition advice to early learning practitioners or parents or to convey that to the kids, because at that age, we just don't really understand it. So it's just kind of trying to be intentional around informing choices and giving everybody a positive food experience. And that doesn't have to be just tasting, right? So you can do songs and rhymes and artwork and play games that relate to food as well. So you can kind of have this whole body experience that is not just about tasting food. It's more intentional around everything that we do. And that includes physical activity as well, right? Physical activity isn't just necessarily running around. It's what else can we do to be intentional around getting everybody active and then giving them that advice about what to eat and how to refuel as well after the fact.
Okay. Spider, I think you were the first person I ever heard utter the phrase physical literacy. What does that mean exactly in your words?
Well, it's analogous to reading literacy, where we combine words or letters into words and sounds into sentences. Physical literacy is that combination of movements, that running, jumping, sliding, leaping, striking, movements that become the foundations for sport and an active lifestyle for the remainder of their lives. And certainly we'd like to get kids started in these movements so they become much more ingrained in routine to them, so that when it comes time to experiment with things like sport, then they're feeling more confident with themselves and they enjoy the experience. We find that if they don't do these sort of activities before the ages of 7 or 8, then it's a real challenge for them to become active and competent in physical movement, where they do decide that they'd like a more active lifestyle and try sports. So it's really keen that we do target these early childhood kids.
Okay. So one more time, Chris, obviously we're looking very much forward to getting you up here once again. As for the upcoming workshops, they are happening in Fort Smith on Wednesday, March 27th, Hay River, Thursday, March 28th. That's from 1 to 4 p.m. And then Yellowknife, the same day that evening, 7:30 to 10:30 p.m. In Nuvik the following day, Friday, March 29th, and Tuktoyaktuk, Saturday, March 30th. Spider, where can people, who can they contact, and where can they go to find out more about these workshops?
Well, they can contact me, spider@sportnorth.com. Give me a call, 867-669-8329. Registration's free, but we do encourage people to pre-register, please.
And can they register on the Sport North website as well?
No, they'll be referred to calling me directly or sending me an email. I just want to talk to them personally, welcome them to the opportunity, and get them fully signed up.
Okay. And your email?
spider@sportnorth.com.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Cabin Sports Radio tonight. Chris, thank you so much, and looking very, very much forward to having you up here once again.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to come.
All right.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Take care, guys. More to come on Cabin Sports Radio as we continue.
The CSR Podcast.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Taking a look at the NBA, our good friends, the Toronto Raptors, they're sitting fairly comfortably in second place, much like their Toronto hockey counterparts, kind of been coasting over the last 10, 5-5. And there are predictions coming out now as to who is going to come out of the East. Michael Gibbons, what do you think?
Well, like you sort of alluded to in the NHL right now, we talked about teams that are streaking right now and teams that are falling off pace a little bit. This is the time you should be playing with winning habits throughout the course of the season, and that's usually what will separate a mediocre team from a very good team. Even if you're not getting the end result you want every night, because it can come down to puck luck or bad bounces, that's going to happen over the course of an 82-game season. But are you consistently developing winning habits over the course of the season? The Raptors got off to a very hot start. As we know, at the start of the season, they were leading the entire NBA. They were leading the pack in the Eastern Conference for a while, as they were slowly incorporating Kawhi Leonard into their offense, into their defense. Important to note, obviously, coming off a season in which he only played 9 games after a severe quad injury with the San Antonio Spurs, and then forced his hand out of San Antonio and was ultimately traded to the Raptors. So we knew that the quote-unquote load management would be an issue throughout the course of the season. They did say they were going to slowly reintegrate him back to playing basketball on a nightly basis. But the narrative was that come springtime, and we're pretty close. It's officially spring, on Thursday, I think?
Yeah,
the 20th, 21st, right? It's almost springtime. The playoffs are just around the corner. We're 3 weeks, a month away from the playoffs. We would start to see him in back-to-backs. We would start to see him play 3 games in a week. We would start to see him get extended minutes as we get ready for playoffs. There will be no back-to-backs in the playoffs. We know that. So that won't be an issue. There won't be any load management games. That'd be disastrous. There won't be any of that in the playoffs. But now, and especially after the trade deadline, when you're incorporating new pieces in Jeremy Lin, Marc Gasol, and then a couple others that were acquired in the buyout market, some end of the bench rotation type players. Now more than ever, you got to get that chemistry going. There have been some untimely injuries. Fred VanVleet only returned to action last night, missed a few games with a thumb injury. So they've had their fair share of injuries as well. Lowry has missed some time. Really, I think it's only Pascal Siakam that's appeared in, I think, every game for the Raptors this season. And as a result, Nick Nurse has had to experiment. I think he's used up to 18 to 20 different starting lineups just based on the amount of injuries and the amount of man games missed that they've had over the course of the season. So now more than ever, they're going to need to get that chemistry right. And as the Raptors are playing the Knicks right now, I believe they're up a dozen or so around halftime. It's another game that Kawhi's missing with load management. Right, that's right. So especially when you get someone that you're trying to get acclimated to your system in Marc Gasol after the trade deadline, he's not a ball-dominant player like a Kyle Lowry or a Kawhi Leonard, but a lot of times the offense will move through him because he's a very good passing big man. He's a very smart, savvy player. He's a good defender as well. But it's taken some time for him to get acclimated, and for Jeremy Lin, who's struggled, quite frankly, to get acclimated to the new system in Toronto. It'd be nice to see all those pieces come together a little bit more, but with guys still sitting out, whether it's through injury or through load management, they haven't really been clicking, not firing on all cylinders. I think 5-5 in their last 10 games, very comfortably in that second position. I don't think they catch Milwaukee. Milwaukee's certainly given them chances. They've been fairly pedestrian of late, too, and on days when you expect the Raptors might be able to catch some ground, they'll lose by 25 points to the Cleveland Cavaliers, as they did last week. So I don't think they catch ground. I don't think they get that top spot. I think Milwaukee's pretty solid there. Philadelphia, they are clicking now. I think they've won 7 of their last 10 after introducing Tobias Harris into their starting rotation. Joel Embiid, you're always going to get production from him. Jimmy Butler and Ben Simmons. They're playing some pretty good basketball now. I don't think they catch the Raptors. They might be nestled in that number 3 spot that was for a long time held by Indiana, but I think they've finally been confronted with their limitations after Victor Oladipo went down with a season-ending injury a couple weeks ago. They might even fall back further. And then you got the Celtics in the 5th spot. I could see them overtaking Indiana, which would secure home court advantage for them in the first round of the playoffs, at least. So, I mean, if you're a Raptors fan, it's not the end of the world. I think you would like to avoid a second-round matchup against, I think, Milwaukee and Boston, because the NBA does not reseed, if Boston were to overtake Indiana for that 4th seed, that would set up a potential second-round matchup between Milwaukee and Boston in the 1-4 matchup, and Toronto and Philadelphia in the 2-3 matchup, which I think would sit a little bit better with Raptors fans. But, of course, we still have about a dozen games or so to go. Things could change.
I was kind of trying to troll you off the air. I threw out a Stephen A. Smith quote to you that he said earlier today that the Celtics will still win the East. And, I thought I'd get a rise out of you out of that one. You're just like, probably.
The narrative around the Toronto Raptors is that they can have exceptional regular seasons. Franchise best 59 wins.
Right.
Last year, 59 and 23.
Yeah, that seems like recent memory. Yeah.
Pretty good. And that's what sort of facilitated the move to trade for Kawhi. Masai Ujiri and management felt that they had to take a chance of being great versus being mediocre.
Right.
That they had reached their ceiling with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry as their 2 centerpieces. So now you introduce someone like Kawhi and make these other changes as he did around the deadline. Unfortunately, you're seeing both Jonas Valanciunas and DeLon Wright thrive with their new club in the Memphis Grizzlies after that Gasol trade. To be fair, they don't have the same offensive weapons.
Yeah, you can't really dwell on that sort of thing, right? Because a different environment alone can make players kind of blossom. So yeah, I mean that I don't know if that's necessarily something they can. I mean, you can't do anything about it now anyway.
No,
but the whole Kawhi Leonard load management situation, we were laughing off the air before we came into this segment that they're actually just starting to put it in brackets now for headlines when Kawhi is going to miss a game. It's no longer just Kawhi Leonard out versus Team X. It's now Kawhi load management out versus Knicks. And you got to wonder, like, it's a little disconcerting. Like you say, you're coming down to it. You're in the last dozen or so games before the playoffs. You're trying to develop some chemistry, a bit of routine, that sort of thing. Meanwhile, your biggest star is still taking what are essentially rest games.
Yeah.
That's not normal.
And we were talking about winning habits. And out of the gates, Toronto and Milwaukee really separated themselves from the rest of the pack when you look at something like point differential, which is usually a pretty good indicator for how strong of a season a team is having. And Toronto came out very good. Lately, it's just those habits aren't there, and then you'll see these games. That 25-point loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers last week was frankly inexcusable. I think regardless of which lineup you put on the floor, and that was, of course, the game that Serge Ibaka got a 3-game suspension for punching someone in the face, which he's developed a bit of a reputation for in the last couple of years. And then you look at the Detroit Pistons, Dwayne Casey's new club, former head coach of the Toronto Raptors for the past few seasons, coach of the year last year before the Raptors canned him.
Right.
They sweep their season series against the Toronto Raptors, and that is a very likely first-round matchup for Toronto. All games close. I think all decided by one possession. There was an OT thriller in there. There was a final second buzzer beater. And then just over the weekend, 110-107. So another single possession game, but that comes down to late game execution. And obviously Nick Nurse would have worked very closely with Dwayne Casey over the past few seasons. A little bit of the apprentice learning from the master type scenario, and Dwayne Casey still got it. He's got a good club in Detroit, to be fair, but that's got to hurt too. So these are now winning teams, but they had a track record there of losing to teams or, quite frankly, playing down to their level of competition.
Right.
And that's not the type of habits you want to start developing this time of year. They are up pretty big on the Knicks right now. That should be a win, the worst team in the Eastern Conference. But you just want to see that consistency.
Yes.
Especially this time of year.
I mean, you got to think that loss to Cleveland is a wake-up call. For sure,
you would hope, but then it was followed up with that loss to the Pistons, who now take the season series from you. Another potential first round matchup: the Brooklyn Nets or Miami Heat, who have always played the Raptors pretty hard.
Right.
I think a lot of people were hoping that maybe this would be the year that the Raptors would cruise through a first-round matchup, but they've always been pretty tough in recent years, whether it was the Wizards last year, the Pacers, who pushed them to 7 in the year that they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. They've never really made it easy for themselves, even to get out of the first round. So I think a lot of people were hoping maybe this is the year that they have a light first-round matchup before you get one of those Boston or Milwaukee, which I don't think will happen because they won't drop down to 4. Very realistically, though, you could be facing Boston or Philadelphia in the second round, and that would certainly be a tough matchup.
Right. The follow-up loss to the Pistons, I mean, I guess is a little bit excusable because they're at least a surging team.
Yes.
7-3 in their last 10.
Dwayne Casey's got them playing very well right now.
And plus there's the whole history. Obviously, those players, anytime they go in to play Toronto, they want to win that game for Dwayne Casey because you know there's something extra there, right? A loss to the 14th place, I should say, Cleveland Cavaliers. Yeah, I mean, that's just a meltdown.
No, that was awful. And to be fair, too, Blake Griffin, we're so used to Lob City and all the highlight reel days he had in Los Angeles with the Clippers. He's playing the best basketball of his life right now. So Dwayne Casey is getting good production out of him. You're going to get production out of Andre Drummond and the supporting cast. They're playing really good basketball right now. And I think any team that secures one of those top 3 spots might not necessarily have the easiest first-round matchup against a team like Detroit, especially the Raptors. So we'll see how it shakes down. I still think they would win a playoff series.
Yeah.
But to your point on the whole load management, I think there's even someone's taken the Twitter handle, "Did Kawhi play?" And then they'll just tweet no or yes. Because it's become that much of an issue. You almost expect him out of the rotation regularly.
Yeah.
And the narrative at the start of the season, and even his camp came out saying it's like, I don't care about games until April, which is fine.
Some of those mean something, though.
They do.
April.
But that's when the games really matter. Yeah. And I think a lot of people would like to see that full-time reintegration happening in the next couple of games or so, because we're as we approach the last 10 games of the season. So
I guess on one hand, I mean, it's kind of a good problem to have situation that you have been in a position all year that you've got this team that you think your best player, you don't have to use every game, and you'll still be comfortably sitting, in the one of the top 3 spots in the NBA standings. It's kind of a nice problem to have when you frame it that way. But when you talk about like how you mentioned, they thought, they were going to slowly integrate Kawhi into the regular lineup. And I mean, it totally makes sense at that time when, like you say, they're coming off a season where he's played 9 games. He's had a pretty bad injury that took him out of last season. Something that you don't want to rush back and you don't want to overdo. But this point in the season, there's got to be question marks as to like whether or not is this still part of the original plan or is there something else going on? Yeah. Like you got to wonder if this is more than just load management by this point.
And to be fair, I think a lot of Raptors fans, if they were to say at the beginning of the season that you got 50 games out of Kawhi, I think he's somewhere around 47 right now. Let's factor in load management and say he sits out 3 or 4 of the remaining 12 games. If you can get 55 games out of a Kawhi, when nothing was guaranteed at the start of the season, and when reports surfaced that the trade was happening, that he wasn't happy, and some people wondered if he'd even play at all, if he'd suit up for a single game and take fines or whatever. I think a lot of Raptors fans would be pretty happy with that, getting those 55 games. And if it means we get beast mode, former finals MVP Kawhi in the playoffs, they'll take it.
Yeah. Well, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you got to, obviously things naturally get ratcheted up a bit when you get into the playoffs. And so, like you said, they're not going to be playing any back-to-backs, but you still got to wonder what the toll is going to be on his body. And when you get to, game 5, game 6, game 7 of a really intense series, how is Kawhi
40 plus minutes a night?
Yeah, how is Kawhi Leonard going to hold up?
Yeah,
it's really interesting. There's a lot of question marks. Again, kind of a good problem to have, that you can do this with your top player and still have no worries about getting into the playoffs. But when it gets real, very interesting situation. Transitioning to March Madness, of course. March means March Madness, NCAA college hoops. I've never really been a follower of the NCAA college basketball. I don't think most people are until you get to March Madness and then brackets. Yeah. There's just something about brackets that people like, I got to do a bracket. I don't even, and then people just like pick teams. Most of the time, they don't even know anything about any of the teams.
And then by day one, 94% of all brackets created are completely busted because there's a Cinderella story developing in a region or something like that. I think this year will be a particular interest for Canadian basketball fans, just being that RJ Barrett is at the forefront of the number one seed in the entire field, and that is Duke. Of course, playing alongside
Duke, the number one seed.
Shocking, right? Mike Krzyzewski at the. I hope I pronounced that right. At the helm.
I won't tell him.
A long time coach. Very successful basketball program. Obviously, gets some of the best recruits in all of America and Canada. But yeah, Barrett playing alongside Zion Williamson, of course, an absolute freak. 6'8", 280 pounds, can jump out of the gym. Projected to be the consensus first overall pick for the upcoming NBA draft. Potentially going to New York, sitting with a very, very bad record in the NBA's Eastern Conference right now. But RJ Barrett of Mississauga, Ontario, is a really special talent, widely regarded as one of the best, if not the best, Canadian prospect ever. Really the full package. A great passer. I believe he set an ACC freshman record for scoring, averaged almost 23 points a game with the Blue Devils this year. And again, playing alongside Zion, who's a pretty ball-dominant player himself, but doesn't shy away from the big moments either. Zion went down with a knee sprain a couple weeks ago, and his numbers and efficiency, and that's what people like to look at is your efficiency, both up significantly in that time that he missed. And I think another reason why Canadian basketball fans can get behind him is he's actually shown a willingness to play for his country, which has been an issue.
What?
Yeah, it's serious. Between Tristan Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, two of the best prospects this country's produced in recent years, have shown limited willingness to play and represent Canada on the international stage. RJ Barrett has done that for the FIBA Under-19 Men's Championship and led the country to gold against Italy in the gold medal game. So definitely a player to watch, alongside Williamson, of course. And it all kicks off on Thursday. They're the number one seed for the whole field, so they should have an easier bracket. But, of course, that's what makes March Madness so good, is that it's all single elimination. So you get some pretty crazy upsets, some very dramatic finishes, and it makes for a very good couple weeks of basketball.
All right. I'll pick Nebraska.
Excellent.
All right. We are going to come back for one more segment on Cabin Sports Radio. A historic win for Canadian tennis. We'll talk more about that when we come back.
You're listening to Cabin Sports Radio, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North. Check out sportnorth.com for more, as they are moving sport forward. One more segment to go. Canadian tennis has a brand new face, and it is an 18-year-old named Bianca Andreescu. She became the first woman to win the Indian Wells tournament. Out of Mississauga, Ontario, had an incredible run, beat the 8th seed Germaine Kerber in 3 sets, unofficial 5th Grand Slam and premier event. And what a story.
Mm-hmm. I think ranked 152nd to start the 2019 season, and has just slowly made her way up. I think was going into this tournament ranked 60th. And when all is said and done, after capturing yesterday's title, she will move all the way up to 24th in the world after going in as the wild card for the Indian Wells title. So really, really cool. Not so shocking, though. I think she's won 28 of 31 matches this year and racked up wins against some pretty impressive people. Caroline Wozniacki, Venus Williams, and now Angelique Kerber. And I think her overall record against top 100 players is pretty darn good. And like you alluded to, 18 years of age. So really, this could be the start of something really special for Canada.
Yeah, she's been playing at least semi-pro since I think 14 or 16 years old. So she's no stranger to the limelight now, but not this bright a limelight. And you could kind of hear it in her post-game press conference. She mentioned that it has not even sunk in yet. One of the reporters asked, like, are you aware of what you've accomplished today? And she's like, no, like, I don't even want to talk about it. It has not sunk in yet. And plus, I have another match in like 2 days.
Yeah, Miami Open, which starts, I believe her draw is tomorrow.
Yeah.
The tournament officially getting underway today. We've been waiting for a Canadian player. We've had notable players burst onto the scene in the past couple of years, going back to 2014. Milos Raonic on the men's side got as high as, I believe, the 3rd seed, now the 14th ranked men in the world. Denis Shapovalov also on the men's side is 23rd in the world. He's had some success. And then, of course, Eugenie Bouchard, who was actually just ousted from the Miami Open, got all the way up, I believe, to as high as 5. So 2014 was a great year for Canadian tennis, but we never had anyone get that signature win. Certainly appearances in semifinals and finals for Grand Slam events, but never got that signature win. This isn't, to be fair, this isn't a Grand Slam event, but as a lot of people in the tennis world will allude to, Indian Wells is often regarded as the 5th sort of unofficial Grand Slam, and it's certainly a premier event on the tour. So really an exceptional win, and like we said, the first wild card ever to win an Indian Wells title on the women's side. So really, really special.
And so with that, Bianca Andreescu becomes $1.3 million richer.
That's right.
And much more to go. So with that win, she not only gave the press conference, she not only schooled one reporter, which was hilarious. She then immediately turned around and gave the sports media the quote of at least the week. Here is Bianca Andreescu on her win at Indian Wells.
It's not moonballing. It's just hitting heavy to her backhand with more spin. We're not under 12 here, but
That's exactly what I
but sometimes, it maybe looks like a moonball because I didn't set up properly, but that's not my intention. A year ago, during this period, I've been struggling a lot with my tennis and with my body too. So it's crazy what a year can do. I was playing 25Ks in Japan, and now I'm the... Can I say the F word? No, I can't. The effing champion of Indian Wells. It's crazy. Crazy is the word of the tournament for me. Just crazy.